Story 1. We have effectively treated most people with cystic fibrosis in the last 5 years. It is the most miraculous medical breakthrough I can think of, comparable only to insulin treatment for diabetics or the combination therapy for HIV patients in the 1990s. In this time, thousands of cystic fibrosis patients saw their projected lifespans return to normal. The treatments do not work on every cystic fibrosis mutation, but they are remarkable. An article published by The Atlantic last year moved me deeply. It is incredibly impactful, especially the sections about the experiences of those who have not benefited from Trikafta. Story 2. Honestly, mapping the human genome was assumed to be impossible for decades until it was achieved in just a few short years without the recognition it deserved. It is an absolutely mind-blowing accomplishment. Story 3. My girlfriend has Hashimoto's disease, and her thyroid is essentially non-existent. She only needs to take one small pill in the morning to live a normal life instead of facing severe consequences. Millions of people worldwide take one small pill each day and can manage diseases that were once deadly. I want to clarify that there is no cure for Hashimoto's disease, and my partner is simply taking levothyroxine to compensate for her thyroid function. I apologize if my original comment gave anyone false hope. Story 4. It is relevant to inform everyone that in 1994, the invention of the year went to the widget in a can of Guinness that helped carbonate the beer only when you opened it. The second place was awarded to the internet. Sometimes the world does not care because they do not fully understand. Story 5. Induced pluripotent stem cells have revolutionized stem cell research, moving away from cells derived from embryonic sources, which has raised numerous ethical debates. There are also potential issues with the body rejecting cells if they come from a donor other than the transplant recipient. Scientists discovered that ordinary skin cells can be reprogrammed into stem cells by exposing them to specific transcription factors. These cells can then be differentiated into specific types, such as cardiac cells or neurons. For example, in a Parkinson's patient who has lost 95% of the neurons involved in motor activity, doctors could harvest their skin cells, convert them into stem cells, differentiate them into neurons, and transplant them into the brain to help recover some of the deficits. This process is incredibly fascinating, and I believe we have only begun to explore its full potential, especially when combined with gene editing technologies like CRISPR to potentially cure or treat various diseases. To be fair, this topic may not be widely known among the general public. I was surprised to see many positive comments and enthusiasm for science upon waking up to a flood of responses. Story 6. Serial fortification in the 1990s has saved many babies from spinal deformities. It is my favorite study and outcome. Story 7. Cancer immunotherapy. Drugs like Opdivo and Keytruda have transformed cancer treatment. They are relatively new, having been introduced less than 10 years ago, and many people are still unaware of them. Story 8. I feel like the excitement around the James Webb Telescope came and went very quickly. I was very enthusiastic about how intricate and difficult it was to design, launch, and deploy that marvel orbiting the sun. If something were to go wrong, there was a very small chance we could fix it. The problems with the Hubble Space Telescope could be addressed because it was in low Earth orbit, allowing astronauts to repair it. While we're at it, we should also consider the space shuttle missions. Story 9. I love this entire Reddit thread. I have felt disenchanted and cynical lately about the direction society is heading, and these comments give me hope and remind me that there are brilliant people out there. Story 10. CRISPR-Cas9 is groundbreaking technology. People who were born blind have had their sight restored through genetic modifications enabled by this biological technology. Mosquitoes can be eliminated, potentially eradicating malaria by editing genes, which are then passed on to offspring, rendering them sterile. Food can be and has been enhanced nutritionally, as seen in the case of golden rice, which produces more vitamin A in impoverished countries. It's like living in a science fiction narrative, yet many people remain indifferent. Many are asking why we still have mosquitoes or why this hasn't been achieved yet. The answer is that this technology is still in its early stages. It represents a significant accomplishment for humanity and a step forward in our ability to shape nature, but it is still imprecise. Targeting specific genes in various species, including our own, is time-consuming and requires extensive trials to achieve accuracy. Targeting multiple genes simultaneously is exponentially more challenging. Remember that genes are merely DNA sequences located randomly along the entire chain, and each sequence is rarely situated next to others. Some have also pointed out that we do not fully understand the impact this may have on not just one species, but on all those that interact with the altered organisms. In summary, while this technology is remarkably advanced, with great advancements come significant questions and potential consequences that must be carefully considered before widespread application. Story 11. I grew up during the AIDS crisis. It was twice as scary as COVID-19 and 10 times as devastating. The fact that a cure has essentially been found and that AIDS and HIV are no longer considered a physical or social death sentence is overwhelming in the best way. However, the fact that this is rarely discussed is overwhelming in the worst way. Story 12. The invention of the blue light-emitting diode changed everything in electronics. The blue LED provided the final piece needed to produce true white light and paved the way for all devices with screens. Story 13. Not as crazy as others, but as a type 1 diabetic, I find it astonishing that they can produce insulin. You're telling me my body can't, but someone in a lab can just discover the formula? Story 14. Not a scientist, but a student here studying central pattern generators. Neuroscientists have discovered that our spine can generate rhythmic movement patterns, such as walking, without brain involvement. This is currently being explored as a treatment option for spinal cord injury. A local researcher with a lab dedicated to this topic visited my neuroscience class last semester and gave a guest lecture. He believes we are within 20 years of people paralyzed from spinal cord injury being able to walk again with an electrical implant. I think about this at least once a week and have never heard it mentioned by those outside the field of neuroscience. Story 15. I worked on the human papillomavirus vaccine. I helped prove that it can be given to children and potentially eliminate the disease entirely. We will no longer have to worry about it. Unfortunately, many people do not appreciate this effort. It seems that a significant portion of the country is opposed to it. I cannot express how much it means to me for this comment to gain attention, especially now. Thank you all. Much love. Story 16. Claude Shannon and Information Theory. It took some time for the technology to advance, but computers, mobile phones, streaming, and the World Wide Web would have been significantly delayed without his work. Story 17. 1. The discovery of gravitational waves should open a whole new way to see the universe, including events before the ionization event in the early universe. Artificial intelligence tools can efficiently determine the structure of proteins, a process that was proceeding very slowly before this discovery. Story 18. Eastern Bloc nations, particularly Georgia, have been using bacteriophages to combat bacterial infections for many decades, while the West focused on developing antibiotics. Bacteriophage treatment is available in the United States when all other options have been exhausted. Drug companies seem to struggle with monetizing this treatment, resulting in its marginalization within the medical field. Update. Bacteriophages are commonly used in genetic research. I have specified and utilized them myself. This is not the same context. Historically, the technique involves finding a naturally occurring, mutated phage that targets the specific bacteria of interest. In the United States, the primary concern has been the potential presence of Shiga toxin or similar genes in the phage. In my experience, this concern is misguided for two reasons, making the assertion questionable. Although I have not encountered conclusive evidence, decades of prior research have not indicated this as a problem. Nonetheless, testing for this is relatively simple with today's technology. A fun question. Where do you usually look for a suitable phage? Story 19. HIV antiretroviral medications were much needed during the 1980s and generated significant awareness. It seems that they are now just another medication, but I believe they are remarkable and am grateful for the lives they save. I often see advertisements on television and am continually impressed by the advancements made in this field. Story 20. Not a scientist, but it blows my mind that we casually walk around with devices that can show us our location within a few feet anywhere on Earth and how to get to any other location. Global Positioning System technology, LED screens, lithium batteries, and central processing units work together to create something truly remarkable. Story 21. Thank you all for your awesome answers. I cannot thank everyone individually, but please know that I will read each response and explore a few research topics tonight. I appreciate you all. Story 22. The discovery of the memory engram and the ability to manipulate memories within the brain is groundbreaking. A researcher at Boston University successfully identified the specific groups of neurons that correspond to individual memories. This individual also demonstrated the capability to manipulate these memories, either deleting or artificially creating new ones. It is truly one of the most fascinating advancements in neuroscience. Dr. Steve Ramirez, the researcher, explains the entire subject in a compelling and accessible manner. Story 23. Vaccines. We completely eradicated a disease. It's gone forever. Deadly illnesses seem to be a law of nature. Instead of finding a way to cope with it, we decided to rewrite that law because we could. Now, we have individuals who refuse to take vaccines because someone wanted to sell a measles vaccine and profit from it. Story 24. AlphaFold 2 has a significant chance of being the most transformative tool in the history of biological sciences. It is open source and free to download, which means that any biological laboratory in the world can access it. Additionally, because it is open source, it is easy to adapt to specific situations, even more than a convolutional neural network normally is. The research currently being conducted with AlphaFold's assistance will shape the entire human experience for decades to come, and it is relatively new. However, many people are expressing strong opinions about artificial intelligence in general, both positively and negatively, while actual developments get drowned out by negativity. It feels surreal to realize that we may have discovered something as influential to human society as the invention of the clay-fired brick, yet few seem to recognize it. I would like to thank the user named Calamity Clambake for requesting an explanation of AlphaFold. They have received several different explanations, each approaching the topic differently, and all of them are excellent. I firmly believe that nothing is too complicated to understand. There are just different ways to convey information that resonate with some individuals and not with others. I am confident that now nearly anyone could grasp the ideas behind it, as many people have contributed their own versions of the explanation. This gives me a warm and fulfilling feeling today. Story 25. GLP-1 medications are nothing short of revolutionary. They stabilize blood sugar in diabetics and promote weight loss for obese individuals who have not had success with other treatments. They also help curb addictions to alcohol, smoking, and even shopping. These medications have been shown to be protective of cardiovascular health and are used for kidney failure. Additionally, they serve as a treatment for certain liver diseases. This is just what we have confirmed so far. In my opinion, GLP-1 medications rank alongside penicillin and pasteurization. Story 26. I'm not a scientist, but I feel that the microplastics present in our bodies, including the testicles and beyond the blood-brain barrier, have resulted in a surprisingly nonchalant reaction. Story 27. I am not a scientist, but I think what was accomplished with messenger RNA vaccines to counter the pandemic is grossly underappreciated by the majority of the population, as is the development of messenger RNA technology, which is a versatile tool. Generally, any highly complex development like that and the human papillomavirus vaccine is not sufficiently appreciated by people who do not understand the complexity of the technology. Story 28. I found the discovery of exoplanets fascinating because we are still discovering them. Early philosophers speculated that exoplanets existed, and now we have confirmation thanks to technology. It makes me think of all the things we speculate on now that future technology and humans will uncover. Story 29. As a geologist, the discovery of mantle blobs and the latest theory that they may be debris from the early planetary collision that formed the moon is fascinating. Story 30. The direct-acting antiviral pills essentially cured hepatitis C 90% of the time. Many drugs treat the disease, but few ever provide a cure. Story 31. The doctors in London who proved that cholera was caused by bacteria in water did so by mapping the locations of cases in relation to street water pumps. The population was angry because one of the wells had the clearest water. After the handles of the pumps were removed, the number of cases decreased and eventually disappeared. Prior to this discovery, cholera and many other diseases, such as malaria, which comes from the Latin word for bad air, were thought to be caused by airborne odors. However, diseases like tuberculosis are transmitted through droplets. Story 32. I'm not a scientist, but I saw that researchers in Japan have found a way to grow teeth, which would eliminate the need for implants. In the not-too-distant future, you might see adults walking around with baby teeth. Story 33. There is a promising new treatment device for tinnitus developed by the University of Michigan that is awaiting FDA approval. Story 34. Not a science person, but the work that Colossal is doing is impressive. The fact that, as of last check a month ago, they only need to fill 45 gaps in the genetic code for the thylacine is mind-blowing. 45 gaps represent a 99.9% complete genome. Do you know how long DNA is? There are only 45 gaps left until a viable genome is complete. Then they can start working on creating it and inserting it into a viable surrogate. I might actually get to see an Australian tiger, the icon of Australia, in my lifetime. Look at this progress. Story 35. The first picture of a black hole was a significant news story, but I don't think the general public fully appreciated how remarkable that is. Story 36. My mind went in another direction. Based on all the hype, we were supposed to be amazed by an invention that would change humanity. Turned out it was just for mall security. Segue. No one cared. Story 37. Prion disease. People do not fully understand it, which leads to dismissive attitudes. I have seen individuals giving away deer meat that tested positive for chronic wasting disease, and someone actually consumed that meat. As a result, I was banned from the group for expressing my concern. Story 38. Why Nations Fail. The Origins of Power, Prosperity, and Poverty, 2012. By economists Darren Acemoglu and James A. Robinson examines the causal relationship between well-funded institutions and a nation's wealth. They demonstrated that strong and fair institutions are a key factor in a nation's prosperity, indicating that good institutions are the most reliable predictors of future wealth at the national level. Despite the success of their book and their research winning the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2024, political dynamics worldwide remain largely unchanged. Their findings, which challenge economic libertarianism and question the preference for smaller government, have had little effect in curbing the resurgence of these policies in recent times. Story 39. How to land humans on the moon. Incredible technology, but no one was interested in developing it further. There is still some discussion about it, and that technology would still exist, but nothing has been done. Story 40. The protein folding problem has been largely solved. We can take a string of amino acids and predict the structure with a high degree of accuracy in minutes. This process used to take years. The knowledge gained from this will change medicine and evolution in ways that we cannot yet comprehend. Story 41. Next-generation sequencing is how we are able to sequence people's genomes in a few days for a few $1,000s. While the original Human Genome Project spent about $1 billion to sequence the first human genome, it is what is making medicine possible. Story 42. If you grew up in the 1970s, you heard a lot about stomach ulcers causing serious health issues. It was blamed on stress, but one scientist determined that it was actually caused by bacteria and even tested it on himself. That scientist deserves recognition. Story 43. Not a scientist, but quantum entanglement is fascinating. Most people have no idea what it is. Honestly, I barely understand it. I just have a basic understanding. Story 44. There is still much to explore, but we recently discovered a potential explanation for how environmental and metabolic factors influence the expression of certain genes in our DNA, amyloid proteins. This finding is significant because it partially redeems long-discredited genetic theorists such as Lamarck, Lysenko, and Ivan Mishurin, who believed that environmental factors were the primary drivers of heritability and regarded DNA as overstated in this context. The issue was that once we gained a better understanding of DNA, we slightly overcorrected and dismissed the influence of environmental and metabolic factors in favor of a DNA-exclusive framework. However, this approach has always struggled to fully explain certain phenomena. Recent studies have demonstrated that heritability in alcoholism, which was inadequately explained by DNA alone, is actually clarified by DNA methylation and amyloid proteins. These proteins can cause specific genes within our DNA to express more strongly, less strongly, or even switch off entirely. Ultimately, it has become clear that the truth has always been a combination of both influences. Ignoring the significance of DNA was a mistake for the Lamarckist and Micurinist factions, but mainstream researchers also made a critical error in dismissing the opposing perspectives for an extended period. Story 45. I recently read that South Korean scientists found a way to revert a colon cancer cell to an almost normal cell, which would eliminate the need for chemotherapy. It's still in the early stages, but it's remarkable. Why aren't we all excited and helping with research? Story 46. There is evidence in neuroscience that the brain is not a single consciousness but contains several consciousnesses. In split-brain patients, one side of the brain can know something that the other side does not. One side of the brain will create stories about why the opposite side did something. It is completely mind-blowing and challenges how we think about ourselves. Story 47. A 140-year-old DNA evidence may have identified the identity of Jack the Ripper. English historian and author Russell Edwards stated that DNA found on a shawl recovered from the scene of one of the killer's slayings was tested. This revealed that the butcher who terrorized Victorian London's East End in the late 1800s was a 23-year-old Polish immigrant named Aaron Kosminski, who died in a mental institution in 1919. When we matched the DNA from the blood on the shawl with a direct female descendant of the victim, it was the most amazing moment of my life, Edwards told a news program in Australia. Story 48. Lawrence R. Doyle's discovery that dolphins, similar to humans, have a structured language with syntactical complexity. Story 49. Published in late 2024. A study showed that silicates played a catalytic role in the formation of amino acids and protocells, taking a significant step in validating abiogenesis as the origin of life. They redid the Miller-Urey experiment, which demonstrated that simple organic compounds could emerge from inorganic compounds under conditions similar to early Earth. However, to avoid external interferences, they coated the container with Teflon and placed it in a dark room. What happened was nothing. No reaction occurred, and no new compounds were formed, contrary to the original experiment. Since the original container was made of glass, they decided to add a few silicate pellets to their container and repeat the experiment. The results were even better than expected. They obtained fully formed amino acids, not just simple organic compounds. Among these amino acids were the 5 that make up DNA and RNA. Fully closed phospholipid chains, or empty protocells, were observed. Story 50. My husband has a rare autoimmune condition. He should be dead, but he just takes a pill a day. Rare diseases don't receive much publicity, but they change and save people's lives. A shout out to everyone involved. Story 51. GS441524 is a medication developed for a serious cat disease called feline infectious peritonitis. This mutation of feline coronavirus has a 100% fatality rate if left untreated. The medication was first synthesized in 2018 by Gilead Sciences, a company known for developing treatments for HIV based in Raleigh, North Carolina. This treatment reduced the death rate from 100% to over 95% almost instantly. Other countries legalized it long before the United States did, which is surprising given that it was developed here. It is remarkable how it quickly attacks and eliminates symptoms of feline infectious peritonitis. Our cat suffered from neurological feline infectious peritonitis, displaying symptoms such as extreme lethargy, dehydration, complete loss of appetite and thirst, loss of balance, and fever. Most of her symptoms disappeared within about a week. The fever resolved after the first dose. If you have cats, please educate yourself about this serious disease. Most cats that die from it do so because it is challenging to diagnose without advanced imaging or spinal tap, and if treatment is not started quickly, their chances of recovery diminish significantly. Although I am not a scientist, I have devoted myself to learning about this disease while treating our cat. Story 52. 30 years ago, Japan developed a replacement for plastic wrap that was actually more durable and biodegradable. It failed test markets in America because 1. It was made out of shrimp shells, 2. It had a pink hue. 3. There was a false belief that shellfish allergies would cause people to become ill. And 4. The packaging included shrimp, complete with heads. Story 53. Jetpacks. We spent 200 years fantasizing about them as an idea, and now that they exist in working form and are available for purchase online, it has barely registered. Story 54. This was extremely significant. The eradication of smallpox, one of humanity's deadliest diseases, is now shrouded in misinformation. If it were to return, there would be no way to eradicate it. Similarly, in 2011, we eliminated rinderpest, a common infectious disease among cattle. To date, these two diseases are the only ones in history to be eradicated worldwide and are no longer a threat to life. It is also important to note that the global effort to eradicate one of the deadliest diseases in cattle cost $5 billion. The eradication of smallpox in 1967 cost $300 million, which, when adjusted for inflation, is about $2.8 billion. In total, $7.8 billion were spent to globally eradicate some of the deadliest diseases on our planet. Story 55. The fact that bacteria can communicate and have their own language. Quorum sensing. Scientists discovered that bacteria aren't just single-celled organisms. They actually communicate with chemical signals, vote on decisions, and act collectively when they reach a quorum. It's like social media for microbes, literal group chats for germs. And it has been happening on Earth long before humans even existed. This has massive implications, from understanding infections to rethinking antibiotics to designing new bioengineered systems. It's like realizing ants build cities, but on a molecular scale. Story 56. The fax modem was invented in 1843, but remained underutilized for 120 years, because people did not know how to use it until the internet was developed. Most people associate it with heavy usage in the 1970s and 1980s, but it is actually a 19th century invention that received a collective lack of interest from the innovators of its time. Story 57. The digital camera was invented by an engineer at Kodak. Kodak wanted to maintain traditional methods and dismissed his invention. Story 58. An oldie but a goodie. Stellar spectroscopy. Due to quantum mechanics, when light passes close to an atom, the electrons in the atomic orbitals either emit or absorb photons. On a galactic scale, if there are many atoms, that can result in a significant amount of light. However, electron orbitals have specific energy levels depending on the element, and only photons with exactly that energy can be absorbed. The energy of a photon is determined by its wavelength, and we know the characteristic wavelengths of elements very well. This results in a significant number of excess or missing photons that travel across the universe to our telescopes. Consequently, we can determine the elements present in stars and the intervening media from hundreds of light years away, on the largest scale known to humanity, due to the interaction of the smallest scale known to humankind. Story 59. GLP-1 medications for weight loss. The single greatest health risk in America and the world can be addressed with an injection. I remember growing up as the chubby kid, bullied for being one of the few in my grade, but now the majority of Americans are overweight. In simple terms, this drug can switch two hormones to signal the body to burn fat instead of storing it, which feels incredible after being in storage mode for so long. It also makes the body feel full, resulting in hardly any cravings for food. It is amazing to feel like normal people for once in my life. I have lost 50 pounds so far and now weigh less than I did in high school. My body feels great, and the long-term health benefits will be immense. Story 60. Tax breaks for the wealthy do not lead to the economic trickle-down effects that have always been claimed by proponents. This study by Hope and Limburg refuted the economic policies of the last 40 to 50 years. I do not want to hear any politician mention tax breaks for the wealthy again. Story 61. It's less about a specific technology and more about a broad sense, but we have progressed more in the last 5 years than we did in the 200,000 years it took us to get here. We have had fusion reactions and quantum computers. Artificial intelligence, while I dislike the artistic aspect, has revolutionized how we interact with information. Basically, I am so excited to see what technology will look like in the next 10 to 100 years that I can barely contain my excitement. We have advanced information technology so much that in the next few years, we will need to discover an entirely new way of processing information because we have already perfected it. Story 62. Diabetes care. I have a closed-loop system with a continuous glucose monitor that communicates with my insulin pump through Bluetooth, automatically correcting my sugar levels. It's incredible. Story 63. Back in 2016, when the results of the chronic traumatic encephalopathy brain analysis on former football players were published in the Journal of the American Medical Association and showed how extensive and common these injuries are, it should have caused an uproar. People were aware of it, to be sure, but it seems most have chosen to ignore it and assume it is someone else's problem, along with hollow justifications like they knew what they were getting into and they get compensated well enough for that risk. Story 64. In 2022, we achieved net positive fusion energy with a Q factor of 1. More recently, we have achieved a Q factor of 2.3. We accomplished this using 1970s laser technology. Our current systems only need to be technically validated in this high-power setup. We must develop affordable industrial high-power lasers and configure them toward a reaction chamber. We could see operational fusion power plants within the next 5 to 10 years. Story 65. We are on the verge of nuclear fusion as an energy source, yet it often goes unnoticed. Story 66. The solid-state transistor, which was once the size of a light bulb, is now in nanometers, and there are billions of them in a single personal computer processor smaller than a postage stamp. Story 67. Photons behave differently when they are being observed by a human or instrument compared to when they are not being observed. Story 68. The sewing machine. Yes, there were good looms, but if the sewing machine existed in the age of social media, it would be the next best thing. Story 69. Not a scientist, but the theory of inflation explains how all matter and energy in the universe were created in the blink of an eye. Small variations at the largest scales are connected to quantum fluctuations at the smallest scales before the expansion. Essentially, this refers to the moment of the Big Bang, yet nobody seems to grasp how fundamental this concept is. Story 70. In the last couple of years, researchers discovered in algae that non-lethally absorbed a bacterium that produced nitrogen. This represents the birth of a new form of metabolism and the emergence of a new branch in the tree of life. There are only 3 other known cases of an event like this in the history of life, yet I have hardly heard anything about it. The Japanese plastic-eating bacterium received more coverage, but still not nearly enough. Story 71. We had a safe and effective vaccine for a novel virus causing the first pandemic in 100 years within a year. It is often overlooked due to the rise of vaccine skepticism, but that was essentially a breakthrough for biotechnology. I had early access because of my volunteer work, which felt like a privilege. Story 72. Lipitor and other similar statins have been quietly saving millions of lives for years. These medications are often taken for granted and considered standard treatment. People frequently celebrate the lives saved by penicillin or new vaccines, and for good reason, but Lipitor is likely one of the most significant life-saving medications in history. Additionally, nitrogen-based fertilizers are often overlooked, yet the world would probably struggle to support the current population without them. Without this invention, many people would face increased food insecurity, and billions may never have been born. Story 73. I am not a scientist. I just spend a lot of time on Wikipedia. How is everyone so calm about the fact that life originated from non-living matter? Story 74. I have already forgotten the facts, and I need to catch up, but I am reading a course on ecological restoration. I had to read extensively about the global environmental situation, and it is just disheartening. Neither politicians nor business leaders are aware of the current reality. They believe they can continue as they have for years, thinking nothing will change. When they make money, they simply live comfortably while others suffer, as has always been the case. But that is not the reality. If no one takes action, particularly those who hold power, our species will face extinction. This will not occur as dramatically as depicted in Hollywood. It will happen gradually due to the exhaustion and fatigue of our species. We will see fewer children, declining intelligence, more diseases, and shorter life expectancy, the gradual unsustainability of our existence. It is truly disheartening, and no one really understands our situation. Understanding it is complicated, and those who have the power to effect change often do not want to. Story 75. Childhood leukemia. One of my family's dear friends was a pediatric hematologist who went on to chair the department at a university and has since passed away. When I was a child, she used to have binders with pictures of every single one of her patients, all of them children, all of whom had died from leukemia. Our insurance agent, who is about 10 to 15 years younger than us, is a survivor of the most common form of childhood leukemia. Thanks to our family friend and other researchers, over 90% of all childhood leukemia is curable. That is miraculous. Story 76. Photovoltaics enable the creation of panels that have no moving parts or fuel requirements while generating usable energy. This leads to a cleaner environment and provides offsets to reduce the consumption of electricity from oil, coal, and gas. Story 77. A sustained fusion reaction occurred last February in France. It is a significant development, akin to the alchemical discovery of the 20th century. Additionally, gravitational waves have been detected. This opens a new window for observing a fundamental yet elusive aspect of the universe, much like the invention of the telescope or the microscope. Story 78. Artificial fertilizer production is a significant discovery that has impacted countless lives. It has saved billions of people from starvation and death, yet it does not receive the recognition it deserves. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.